Well, I will get started then. Thank you for attending this session of Yes, Youth Can. This is one of our final sessions, and it's all about Youth Move. And Youth Move Idaho is, the thing that we've been promoting this whole time. It is the chapter of Youth Move that specifically runs in Idaho that acts kind of as an emotional support team and network for Idaho youth who get involved through the federation and everything. So, well, okay. The next person to go and tell the story is me, and I'm clearly a little nervous about it because I've never done this before. Um, I've always
This
really, I've done things like I've talked about, you know, synopsis, little pieces of my story in the past, but I've never truly told anyone the entirety of it, which is stressful to me to be here now. But I realize that where I'm at in my advocacy, I need to get to the point where I can say this and I can own it and I can help people with it. Because if I don't heal from it myself, I don't really know where in myself I'm going to find the energy and the capacity to help heal others. So a lot of my trauma began at a very young age. And not only that, but a lot of my trauma, although seemingly incredibly different, is very, very much interconnected. So when I was 6 years old, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And this autoimmune disease does not have a cure, and it is very rare for the most part. Generally, the people who get diagnosed with it are far later in life. And I was 6. I was a very strange case, to say the very least. It's called Guillain-Barré syndrome, and essentially what it does to the body is ascending paralysis. Your nerves start to degrade. Your nerves start being eaten away at by the other cells in your body. And it starts with just some numbness and some tingling in your extremities, and then suddenly you wake up one day like I did, and you can't walk. And you can't talk and you're slurring your speech and people don't know what's wrong with you and you're 6 years old and you don't know how to tell people what's wrong with you. Um, so when I was diagnosed, no one really thought that I was going to survive. Most doctors who are supposed to be professionals thought that it was a million other things before they thought it was this random rare French disease. And I don't blame them for that. And clearly I'm okay now. But the issue that it has today is the fact that it's dormant in my system. Technically, I still have it. Technically, I could relapse at any point. And from now to the time I turn 23, I have the highest chance of relapse in my life. And in my mind, 23, like my 23rd birthday, is this milestone. It's like if I get there, then I can start thinking about what I'm going to do with the rest of my 20s and what I'm going to do in my 30s. And I can start thinking about a future. And so, um, that sort of pressure forced me to really think about life as a race constantly, uh, which led me to being diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder following my hospital stay and following that trauma. And I never received therapy, I never received counseling because A, I was so young that those services didn't exist in Utah. And there was around a 50% chance that it would go away by the time I reached adolescence. And so we dealt with it kind of, and we did what we could then. And then I was suddenly a teenager and I still had an anxiety disorder and it was still bad. And so over the last, I would say, 7 years now, ever since I was about 12, I have been always working to overcome this. And generally, I've been overcoming it on my own. But um, after years of bullying, like being bullied for having this disease, because once I entered elementary school, everyone knew about it. Everyone knew me as the sick kid. Everyone thought I was contagious. People avoided me because they thought I was contagious. Um, After that, and after growing up and kind of facing this weird amount of ridicule for something I had no control over, I was so anxious to talk to people. I was so anxious to make friends. I almost dropped out of school. Well, not dropped out, gone to homeschooling by the time I was 12 in sixth grade because I couldn't deal with the fact that people didn't like me. Because the less and less people liked me, the less and less I liked myself. To the point where I started doing things that were so out of character that they didn't even make sense for me. I started not turning in assignments and I was the straight A student. I don't know. I was just so mad at myself for not being what I thought the world wanted me to be that I took that out on everyone else and myself included. I was very very sad, but I had nowhere to go. I mean, I was 12 and the anxiety and depressive symptoms that I started showing to people, no one knew how to deal with them. And so I kind of realized as I got into middle school, my mom said, just give middle school a chance, just see if it gets better. Once I found more people that were similar to me and more niche groups to get into, more niche friend groups to have, like the theater kids or the choir kids, it did get better, but not fully. So, um, as I kept going through school, things did get better and I became much more comfortable with myself. Not fully, but more than I was, which was a big deal. It meant that if I was accepting myself, then maybe other people would start to as well. And things were going really, really fantastic. I felt loved. I felt cared for. I had these friends, this friend group that transitioned from middle school to high school with me, which was a big deal because that usually doesn't happen. And things were going very well until I was 15. When I was 15, I was faced with the news that I'd be moving from Salt Lake City, Utah to Boise, Idaho. And not only would I be moving very shortly, but a month before I moved, I experienced the first major loss in my life. Um, a friend of mine, who I still miss very much to this day, committed suicide, and he had barely turned 16. And this was a very big deal to me because I had only been to one other funeral when I was like 7. And so obviously I remembered it, but it it was different. It was different because this was a person that I thought would be going through high school with me. This is a person that I thought I'd be able to rely on. And then I didn't even get to properly grieve because the friend group that I had had in Utah, I had to leave just, a month later to move to Idaho. So as I was grieving and as I was moving and as I was going through these major stressors, I turned to writing and I turned to the arts, but I didn't really turn to other people. I didn't really talk to people once I moved. I made some friends and I ended up making more friends, but I was grieving and I was angry and I was really mad again, all over again. It felt like I was in the same place when I was 12 years old and I was depressed and I didn't know what that word was or that I could use that word. And over the next 9 months, from when I moved to May of that next year, over that 9 months, I lost 3 people, all 18 or under, to suicide. And so my life in high school was just a series of grieving. It was just loss after loss, and it felt like there was no way I was going to get better, especially as the whole time that I was grieving these people dying, these people who were not much older than me, these people who meant the world to me. I also had to think about my own health, and we had to monitor outbreaks of different flus and different viruses that would come up, which is now very pertinent in 2020 and 2021. But um, because of my autoimmune disease, I have not been able to be vaccinated since I was 6 years old because I am that very small population that needs herd immunity. And if I were to get sick with anything, there's a chance that I would be hospitalized. There's a chance that I would be paralyzed again. There's a chance that I could die. And because no one my age has this disease, no one's grown up with it, people don't really know what answer to give me. I can't get vaccines because if you look on the inside of vaccine inserts, it talks about if you have a history of Guillain-Barré syndrome, do not receive this. And basically every vaccine available has that. So I was grieving my friends. I was grieving things that I wanted for my future. I was grieving so many opportunities that I didn't even know I could have because if I was this sick kid and I had to be careful about everything, then what was I going to do? And things did get better. As as I kept going through high school, not only did I find more people and I found places to be a leader, I realized that I was a workaholic really early on in my high school career because anytime that I was grieving something, my first thought was, well, I should sign up for the school play, or I should go and join this club, or I should go and distract myself with something else. Um, and for a long time, I was just distracting myself until I joined a group called Sources of Strength, which is a mental health group specifically for high schools. It's a national organization. They target high schools and they get together groups of teens that help educate other teens about mental wellness. And my counselor put me in. She's a woman who I will love and adore and thank every day because she's just so wonderful and a huge catalyst to me getting better. But she was the one who invited me to a a little event called Idaho Youth Unite, which was held downtown in 2019 when we could still see each other face to face. And altogether, I presented with three of my other friends at the time who were all in Sources of Strength. And that is where I heard about Youth Move and what it was. And I was so intrigued because I had never heard of like an emotional support group that you could attend where you could also work on advocacy and you could also talk about what you were going through. And although I was 17, I had grieved a little bit when I was 15, but I hadn't fully processed how much I was truthfully hurting. I kept distracting myself so I wouldn't have to deal. And while I was distracting myself, I got in and out of toxic and abusive relationships with people who didn't really love me and who I've had to make peace with the fact that they never really loved me because I didn't love myself. So I was willing to settle for something that someone else called love when in all actuality, all it was doing was still holding me back. So I joined Youth Move in the end of 2019 into the beginning of 2020 before the pandemic and everything. And it was genuinely a life-changing experience because it meant every Wednesday I'd be down at the brick house and I'd be in a place where not only could I talk to other people, I could also choose what parts of my story to tell. I could talk about one week, I could say, well, hey, I've got this autoimmune disease. I didn't have to lead with that. I didn't have to worry about how people would perceive that. For a long time, I would lead with, oh, I have an autoimmune disease because it was a very easy test to see if people wanted to truly be my friend or if they couldn't handle something of that emotional caliber. Especially when I talk about I have an autoimmune disease and I have till 23 to find out whether or not it's going to affect me again in my lifetime. Um, there are certain people who can't deal with that possibility, and I understand that. And so for a long time, I was pushing people away because I was so blunt and just forward with everything that I was experiencing that I wanted to keep them away. It was like a shield. And this was the first time that I truly let people in and let them understand me and let them ask me questions and knew where my boundaries were and where my limits were. And so I stayed working with Youth Move and I was influenced to go to my very first poetry slam and to compete and to read these poems about this horrible relationship I was in at the time and about like trying to love myself despite all of that. And it was, I can remember that moment because I think it's one of like three epiphanies that I've ever had in my life. And I have a low threshold for epiphanies, so I have to cherish these as they come. But in that moment, I remember so much. I remember feeling like this is truly where I was meant to be and the people I was meant to be working with. And this was where I belonged, not just doing the poetry slam, but with these people to back me up and with these people that I could cheer on as well. This felt like a community that truly meant something to me. And it wasn't just another leadership title. It wasn't just another, excuse to be out of the house and be busy and be an overachiever. It was something I truly wanted to do. And so when the pandemic hit, it was very jarring because not only were these fears about the hospital and about my illness coming back to light, it meant that my quarantine was going to be longer than everyone else's, which it has been. But it also meant that like Youth Move, what was going to happen to that one like safe haven that I had? What was going to happen? And so luckily, as time has gone on, I have been given many, many wonderful opportunities. I mean, I have the opportunity here to talk to all of you at this conference now, but I was very graciously invited to start helping assist in running Youth Move back last July. And then I kind of moved up the ranks to, well, I'm helping out with Youth Move, but also I can help attend these meetings and I can help run social media and I can, speak out at other family groups. I can be this youth voice and this youth presence and I can work to build these community outreach things like this conference. And I can keep doing Youth Move every week and I can hopefully inspire people in the way that I was inspired. And so even though it's been really difficult and the hard part is not necessarily over, I still have to get through the rest of quarantine. Even though that's happening, I have such a great love and respect and gratitude towards everything that I've been allowed to experience and that I've been, lucky enough to experience and the wonderful people that I get to work with each day and that I get to meet and connect with through this. Like, I didn't think this is where my life would be at 18. I thought that I'd be out of state college doing something crazy like in New York, but I am honestly really glad I'm not doing that right now. I'm really glad that this is where I'm at and this is who I am and this is the life that I've been allowed to lead.